Okay, thank you for those that have joined. My name is Danielle Coleman. I will be the moderator for today's presentation. Welcome to our latest Wonder Chat for Parents titled Managing Your Child's Anxiety with Support and Knowledge. A few housekeeping items before we get started. If you're attending the live webinar, you will be able to ask questions to the presenters in the Q&A feature. Also, if attendees would like to communicate with other participants, you're able to use the chat feature to do so. I will be monitoring both throughout the presentation and will let our presenters know if there's any questions. If you are watching the recorded webinar, you are welcome to email questions to our helpline at helpline@wondersandworries.org. Next slide. Ashley Blackmon and Kim Fryar will be providing today's presentation. We are very grateful to them for providing their knowledge and insight today. We want to make you aware that the content in today's presentation may bring up emotions for you. We recommend that you take care of yourself and step away if needed. We encourage you to call our Wonders and Worries helpline at 844-WE-WONDER or 844-939-6633. If you'd like to talk about any topics discussed in today's presentation, or if you'd like individualized support for your families. We are glad you are tuning in with us today and welcome you. I will now hand it over to Ashley and Kim.
Hello, everyone. We're so glad you're here. Just a quick introduction of myself. I'm Kim Fryar. I am a child life specialist and have been a child life specialist for 32-ish years and have been with Wonders and Worries 21-ish years. I am also a parent. I have a daughter and a son. They are both young adults, so I might be sharing some examples from my life as a parent. Go ahead, Ashley.
And I'm Ashley. I sound like a baby talking about my years of experience compared to Kim. I've been a child life specialist for almost 9 years. And then I've been with Wonders and Worries for almost 2 years now. And so I am also a parent. I have a toddler, and I'll be drawing from experiences both with my toddler, but also I worked in the hospital setting for about 8 years as well. So our presentation today, we're both really excited about. It's a topic we're both passionate about, and it's regarding anxiety, and it's talking about how to help your children and teens manage anxiety. And I wanted to make the distinction. We're talking about this through the lens of having a parent with an illness or injury. And so we're looking at it through that lens. We want to give some tools that can help children and teenagers cope with a parent's serious medical condition. And anxiety is normal for all humans. This is growing in prevalence in our society in general, this anxiety. But we wanted to let you know we're going to be looking at it through having a parent with a serious illness or injury. We are not focusing on clinical anxiety, which is a medical disorder defined by excessive feelings of worry or persistent, even intrusive thoughts about certain fears or constant fear in general. We will be talking about ways you can determine if your child has more of this clinical anxiety and what resources are available and where you might want to get them further help if that's the case. But we'll be giving resources and tools from our lens, which is that support with a parent's serious illness or injury. So looking first, let's look behind the mask of anxiety. So we've separated this presentation really into 4 parts. The first part is going to be looking at the mind-body connection. So what's going on in a child's mind and brain? What pieces contribute to anxiety, fear, stress, the hormones and the things taking place, and how can we help children and teens understand that? Because we know that the more knowledge they're able to have, the better they're able to understand what's going on in their bodies, the better regulation they're able to do as well. Next, we're going to look at assessing anxiety. So looking at what's contributing to the child's anxiety and how can you help them name that? How can they identify it and then name what's going on? The next session is going to be support and stress relief. So this part is looking at the actual tools, the tangible activities and tools that are available to help you and your child create a coping plan together. the last part of our presentation is going to be knowledge of resources. So this piece of when to access additional resources if needed, that professional help, but also what resources have we talked about in the presentation and what resources are available for you to use as a parent when helping your kid cope through symptoms of anxiety. So this first part is going to be that mind-body connection. So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the brain and also the difference between fear and anxiety. So the first part I like to use is an example, and it's an example about a spider. And so if you walk out your front door and there's a giant spider hanging overhead, and you have this immediate response of sweatiness, heart rate, that is a fear response. So it's in the immediate moment. It is a present-based response. And all that is taking place in your limbic system, which we'll talk about in a little bit where that's positioned in the brain. But it's looking at your fight, flight, and freeze response. So your immediate reaction to seeing this spider may be to run, which is a flight response. It may be to swat at it, which is the fight response, or you may freeze and hide. All of those are responses that happen in your limbic system, and they're in your brain stem. So it's the very basic part of the brain and the part of the brain that is there to help us survive. And so that is what fear looks like. Anxiety is a bit of higher level thinking. And so in the spider example, what anxiety would be is if a friend comes in your house and goes, there's a spider. When you walk outside, there's going to be a spider hanging from your doorway. And your mind immediately goes to, oh my gosh, what am I going to do about this spider? Do I need to grab a shoe when I walk outside so I can swat at it? It's kind of that forward thinking. So anxiety is not immediate, it is future-based. And so it's dealing with multiple parts of our brains interacting. It's this idea of, what do you know about spiders? What is your previous experience with spiders? All of this going into, well, what is my response then going to be? So it's an overactive amygdala, which is the emotional part of our brain, and it's the psychological, behavioral, emotional, and cognitive responses. Something I want to point out is that fear and anxiety are both contagious, and they're meant to be contagious. This goes back to way long ago when our ancestors were surviving, and they had to be ready to battle whatever tiger was also going after their food so they don't become food. It's created, and it has a purpose in our bodies to help us know how to survive. And it's served us well. And it's important if there is a threat. What happens is when there's not a threat, it becomes challenging and it becomes difficult to manage. And so we want to talk about how we can identify this and then learn how to stay regulated through some of these experiences that our brain and our body do still have. So this is a video. It does a really great job of describing anxiety. And we'll talk about it just a little bit afterwards.
You know what anxiety feels like? We all do. Everyone experiences anxiety in some way or another. It's something that connects all of us together. Why we feel anxiety and what it really is, that may surprise you. Without anxiety, we'd all be in serious trouble. As soon as your brain senses you're in danger, a little piece of it, called the amygdala, kicks in. It gets your body ready to react. That could mean fight, run away, or shut down. It's called the fight, flight, or freeze response. This reaction goes back millions of years to our distant animal ancestors. Animals whose amygdalae were more sensitive to danger were more likely to stay alive and off the menu. Over millions of generations, this developed into the system we all know as anxiety. So you see, anxiety itself is not all bad. But when there's no immediate life or death threat, and your amygdala keeps telling your body that you're in danger, that's when anxiety becomes a problem. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference between getting eaten and public speaking or failing a test. Human society has only existed for a relatively short time. It's messy and complicated and confusing, and our amygdalae just haven't had time to catch up. So sometimes When we're in uncomfortable situations, our brains misread the risk and overreact. Our hearts beat faster and we breathe heavily, pulling more oxygen into our bodies. The muscles in our arms and legs tense up and fill with blood. Our skin perspires to cool us down. This would all be great if we needed to fight or run, but instead, we just feel tense and sweaty. Sometimes our minds go blank and we feel like we can't move or talk. That would be great if we needed to hide. Instead, we just feel stuck. When things trigger our anxiety, sometimes we try to avoid them, like our ancestors avoiding a predator. But that can cause problems when those triggers are important parts of life, like going to school or meeting new people, things that won't just give up and go away. So how does knowing all this help? Well, it starts with remembering what's really going on. There's nothing physically wrong with you. It's just your amygdala trying to tell you it thinks you're in danger, even if it gets confused about how much danger you're really in. Understanding why we feel anxiety is an important step in learning to manage it.
So I think that video does a really great job of explaining some of those things we talked about and how anxiety is there to help us in that fear response and that anxiety response, and how it doesn't always serve us when there's not a threat. But helping recognize what it is and what's happening in our bodies can then help us learn the best ways to manage it. This is another video from Dr. Dan Siegel. He has a book called The Whole Brain Child that I would highly recommend. I'm actually rereading it now that I have a child because I read it previously. And it'll be listed in our resources at the end. But he does a great job. He's going to show us this hand model of the brain. And we're going to watch the video and then we're going to chat a little bit more about it afterwards.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
So this hand model of the brain, I love, and I think it's so helpful. It helps me remember, but I think it's also so helpful in teaching children just about how, our brainstem and this limbic system, that's our fight, flight, and freeze response. So that's the most basic level of functioning within our brain. And then we have all this awesome, additional, more advanced functioning of our brain that really does a great job of all that regulation. But when we're tested, either whether that's anxiety, it's a great example for anxiety, but it also can be all different emotional. It can be anger, it can be different emotional buttons. We result then sometimes when we're not able to use this more advanced cognitive functioning, we result to that brainstem response, that very simplified response. And what I like to point out, and this is in his Whole Brain Child book, but it talks about how actually all this cerebral cortex, this advanced functioning, is under construction, he says. So still developing until mid-20s. And so, sometimes I find parents that can be frustrated with sometimes their teens for not always using this advanced functioning and being able to regulate. And just, it helps me remember, where we are in development, knowing that we're not always able to use this part of our brain completely and perfectly every time. Even as adults, we're still not able to do that. So I love this hand model that he has. The graphic we have here is from The Little Black Duck, and it's focused on improving well-being of people in the autistic community. So it's a really great parenting resource and is also going to be listed on our resources at the end. So this next piece, I want to describe what stress is. And so stress is different than fear and anxiety. Stress is actually a response. So even though it's physiologically similar to fear, meaning we have some of the same symptoms, we experience some of the same things, it's actually a byproduct of fear or anxiety. And stress is really good for us and can be really motivating for us in short term, so short bursts. And one of my favorite parts of this book is Don't Pop Your Cork on Mondays, and we use it in our curriculum with children. And it talks about some of the good things stress can provide for us. And so it talks about how when you're crossing a busy street, stress makes you more aware. It heightens your senses. It heightens your senses and allows you to be more aware of your surroundings. Stress also can motivate us to study more. So if we're nervous about a test or stressed about a test, we're going to study harder. When sports are important to us, stress allows us to practice harder. And then on the day of the game, it helps our senses be more awakened and be more aware so we can play better. So stress has a very positive place in our life and can provide many great things for us. Where stress comes in to harm us is when it's long-term stress. So when we experience this heightened state of being for long periods of time, when there is no regulation, when there's no ability in our body to relax and kind of come back to baseline, it causes us to be dysregulated and to have difficulties. And so that fight, flight, freeze response, just like we've been saying, it can be helpful. But when we're in a high state of stress for a long time, it's hard to step back and see the larger picture. And it's hard to make good decisions and hard to help regulate ourselves when it's ongoing like that for so long. This next slide, I'm not going into detail with, but we decided to keep it in the presentation because we do feel like it has such value if you're looking for more information on how the different systems in our body respond to fear, stress, and anxiety. So for sake of time, I won't go over all of them, but this can be in your notes. And if you're watching online, you can refer or pause back to this slide and learn how each system is affected and the different ways that our body responds to that. So this is an activity that we recommend doing with kids and teens to help create that mind-body connection. So throughout this whole part, this mind-body connection part, we really want to help them realize what emotions are coming out of what reactions. And so looking at where we feel these different reactions and then connecting that to an emotion. And so this activity specifically is from a book, Art with Heart, Ink About It. But you can make this however you would like. I've had some, when kids are younger, I've actually traced their bodies on butcher paper. If your kiddo is older and you still don't necessarily need this resource, you could just draw a body outline. It can be very, very simple. but looking at what they're feeling, what reactions, where they're feeling them in the body, and then helping them connect that to what emotion they have. And so, for example, one of the reactions on the side is knot. I know for me, I have different knots I feel in my body. Sometimes I feel a knot in my throat when I'm really sad. Sometimes when I'm nervous, I feel a knot in my stomach. And so it's the same reaction, but in different areas, and therefore producing a different feeling for me. Same with butterflies. You can have butterflies in your stomach when you're excited. You can also have them sometimes when you're really nervous. So just allowing the child or teen to identify the way their body is responding, connecting it then with what that emotion is. You can use different colors when doing it. You can be drawing X's in the spaces on the body. But just going through feeling by feeling and connecting it with that reaction that our body has, and then taking it a step forward afterwards and connecting what your body's telling you, and then how to identify some coping techniques and cope in healthy ways with that.
Fantastic, Ashley. I'm going to move to the next slide and talk for a little bit about what anxiety might look like. So as Ashley was explaining, the title of this presentation is, looking behind the mask of anxiety. And so we have this acronym with MASK, and anxiety isn't always obvious. Sometimes children and teenagers are able to recognize, oh, what I'm feeling is this sense of anxiety, this nervousness, this worry. But many times they're not aware. And as adults, we aren't aware that that's really what's maybe driving our emotional response or our behaviors. So we're going to take a few minutes and a few slides to just delve into how can we as parents further assess and help our children and teenagers recognize what's going on with all those great tools that Ashley's already described that help us connect the brain and the body. So anxiety might look like irritability, frustration, or anger. That flipping of the lid that Dan Siegel was talking about with the hand model, I absolutely love that hand model. But when a child flips their lid, and if they have anxiety that's just kind of there, they're going to be more at this place of, I might flip my lid a lot more easily. And so can we as adults, for sure. Difficulty concentrating. So this is something that we hear often from children and teenagers that we work with at Wonders and Worries, that I'm trying to focus in school, or I'm trying to learn this new song on my flute, or do these things, but I can't seem to process that information. And anxiety creates that. It might be conscious, like conscious worried thoughts that a child is aware of, or maybe it's not a conscious thought. It's just kind of this struggle for the brain to focus. Disrupted sleep. So this could be difficulty falling asleep. It could be waking in the night and having trouble getting back to sleep, or just not as restful of sleep. Then clingy or difficulty with separation. Of course, this can be very normal for children, and certainly normal when there's an illness or, parental medical situation. But with anxiety, it's coming from that kind of core place of survival of, here's this person that helps meet my basic needs, and being separated from them feels even more anxiety producing. And often this isn't a conscious thing either. And then we've talked about the psychosomatic symptoms, the tummy aches, headaches. I love that activity that Ashley just shared, but just how is it presenting in the body, and being aware as a parent, oh, that could be anxiety, or it could be something else. And then withdrawal or avoidance of activities. So maybe not wanting to do things that they typically enjoy doing, or maybe not wanting to try something new when they typically enjoy trying new things. And for teenagers, this could be lack of motivation or procrastination. So just keeping that in mind when you have a teenager who you're trying to motivate to get their homework done, or, to do certain things. I like to share a tool here that can be a tool just for coping, to help your child cope with anxiety, but it's also a really great assessment tool. And that is reflective listening. When we listen reflectively, so let's think about this little girl who's crying. If I am her mom and I'm saying, you're really upset, I can tell that something's really bothering you right now. And I'm just reflecting what I'm seeing, that can cause her to maybe pause and think about, yes, I am really upset, and this is what I'm upset about. So she may start to tune in a little bit more to what's happening, and you start to gain or gather more information. That's okay. I'm just connecting with her and letting her know that I can see her emotion and that I'm here and accepting of that emotion. Okay, so what are some things that are contributing to children's anxiety? And this is divided out between, when children and teenagers might be at home, and specifically around when they have an ill or injured parent, and then when they may be away from home. So when they're home, it could be, how can I help my parent? What if my parent can't take care of me? That can be an underlying thought kind of across the board, and again, taps into that survival instinct of, what if my basic needs can't be met? What will happen to me? Can I get along with and support my siblings? How do I cope with all of the changes in my home, with visitors coming and going? And then as children get older, that what's happening with my friends? I'm missing out. What if I lose my friends because I'm here at home focused on what's happening with my parent? Just the stress around them. Maybe the family is fighting more. Do I have the support I need? And will things ever be normal again? And then, some of the factors away from school could be, can I concentrate? Like we were talking about before, can I be successful? Will people know what is going on at home? I worked with a middle schooler who this was her biggest anxiety. She was like, when I know I'm going to get picked up for carpool or I'm going to see certain adults, I worry that they're going to ask me, how is my mom and how am I? And kind of jumping down to that, what if I become emotional? She did not want to become emotional. So she really didn't want to answer those questions. So for her, she was able to talk with her mom. Her mom gave her some ideas, and then her mom also encouraged these other adults to not ask those questions. What if I bring germs home and expose my parent to germs that can make things, difficult for them? What if something happens to my parent when I'm gone? And then do I have the support I need? Will things ever be normal again? And of course, there can be many other concerns and stressors that are coming into a child's realm. An example of something that's not specifically illness related, but the parents originally thought that it was. There was a teenager that I worked with who her anxiety was increased and parents saw signs of that, but they didn't really know what was going on. And as they talked with her more, she realized, and she didn't initially realize this, that she had a new phone, a phone, her first phone, and Amber Alerts were coming through. And that was really stressful to her. She was worried about that situation and those involved. She started to worry about her own safety. And so it was just this new thing that she wasn't equipped to navigate. And so they worked together to not have those Amber Alerts coming through. And, it really is about kind of thinking through, what does my child need to be aware of in their world? What's directly affecting them? And how can I maybe limit those things that are outside of their control and their realm of awareness? Okay, so other assessment tips and tools. How can we assess? I really like this scale on the left-hand side. This comes from the book Be the Boss of Your Stress. And that's another book that we regularly use at Wonders and Worries, usually with about 8-year-olds and older. And I use this with adults. It really helps all of us. So breaking down that kind of rate myself on how I'm feeling, but rate myself on how my body is feeling, how my mind is feeling, and how my spirit is feeling. Because those are 3 very different things, and they give us really much more insight. Like, okay, I'm not feeling really good, but my body's feeling really tired or sore, or I have a lot of pain, or, but my mind is really focused on positive thoughts and I can concentrate. And my spirit, maybe I feel really connected and connected to nature and a higher power and to others, or maybe I feel really isolated and like the world doesn't have meaning. So breaking it out can be really beneficial. And then we really encourage you to create a rhythm and a language in your home where checking in around stress, anxiety, just overall well-being is a common thing that you do as a family with all of you, not just with the child that you might be concerned about in the moment, but that it just becomes part of a routine. Maybe it's a Sunday evening routine where everyone's checking in. Maybe it's a morning routine, but that you create language and kind of systems around it. And that you include options for checking in non-verbally, because especially tweens and teens, if they're kind of at this point where they're a little irritated anyway, and we're asking like, rate yourself, tell me how you feel, they may not want to put into words. That might be even more kind of stressful for them. And so this could be magnets on a refrigerator or a dry erase board where they could easily rate, or they could show in the morning, like, or when they get home from school, this is how I'm feeling right now. Or it could be kind of a, oh, I've kind of had it up to here, or this part of my body is hurting, or they hold their stomach or their head. So just be thinking about verbal and nonverbal cues to rate anxiety and to be able to check in, or just well-being overall. And then the other really important thing is tracking this over time. So you see this app. This is one app. There are many others. This is one that I've had some experience with and have had positive experience with. It's a free app. You can pay to get additional features, but it allows any person, adult or I would say middle schooler, high schooler, to rate how they're feeling, different times of the day, different days of the week, and then really look at that. So this might give insight. Let's say, a child, middle schooler is like, wow, I'm noticing I have less anxiety on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Maybe that's a day that they walk to school, or maybe they carpool with a friend. And so kind of thinking about what's happening on those days that is helpful to them. And then just being aware that anytime there's a transition, the start of school, starting a new activity, a surgery coming up, or something new with a medical situation, there is typically increased anxiety, and that's very normal. But being aware of that and then kind of tracking those provide a lot of insight. Okay, so another area to look at is life balance, kind of these key areas, and there are other key areas in life, but we kind of picked these 6 kind of core places as a parent that you can hone in on and just be aware of, especially if you have a sense of my child seeming out of balance, maybe not quite themselves. Let me think about, what is their physical activity been like? How are they sleeping? Is our family their time with friends being like? What about their downtime, their time with studies, or focusing on specific things that they might be learning or doing? And then engage your child in this process. Have them rate themselves. Really older elementary school and certainly middle school and high schoolers can rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10. Do they feel like they're balanced in this area, or is it an area where something feels out of balance for them? And that can help you hone in on what to do. So an activity that's one that can be done easily at home is this stress pie. So it's simply drawing a circle. Your child can do this. You can do this too. Each family member can do this, or you could create a whole family stress pie. So you draw a circle and then divide out this, into pie pieces, or it could be pizza slices, and then have your child identify things that are currently stressful. Or you could make it specific to anxiety and have them focus on what are those things that, are anxiety producing for them, or maybe areas of their life where they're feeling anxiety. And then the idea is to have them color in how much stress are they feeling in that area? How much anxiety are they feeling in that area? And this can really give insight. This particular example was done during COVID. But, one thing that jumps out at me, like as a parent, I might be thinking, okay, we're not able to go as many places. And that's true for many of our families dealing with illness, even, past COVID times. And so as a parent, I might be thinking, I think my child's anxiety and stress is related to the fact that we're not able to go and do many things. But what this child is identifying is that it's more stressful for her dealing with her sibling. And so the way that we might approach that is certainly going to be different depending on what we're honing in on. And then on this activity, children and parents together can identify coping strategies and things that help and support tools that help. And so that's a perfect segue back to Ashley to focus on our next section.
Yeah, thank you for those assessment tools. So this next part I want to talk about, these are going to be some of the tangible activities and support ways and coping tools that you're going to be able to use with your child or teen. The first thing I want to talk about is this idea of neuroception. And so for the graphic, ignore the boxes, but focus on the green lettering. And so it's basically the idea that our body is subconsciously checking in with ourselves, our environment, and our connections to determine if we are safe or unsafe. And so, how this applies to us as parents is being sure that our body and we're in a regulated state prior to helping our children regulate. And so, our body is checking in with ourselves. So, looking at our heart rate. Are you feeling escalated any type of way? Are you feeling your own stressors, your own anxiety? What is your own nervous system doing? And then looking at the environment. Are you somewhere that you're safe and comfortable? If you've ever walked into a room and just immediately felt uncomfortable or that heightened sense of awareness, that's that neuroception happening subconsciously. Something's telling you that something's not okay. So being sure that you're in a good place, in a safe place, in a good environment that both you and your child feel comfortable in. And the last is this most important, this connection piece. So it's kind of this in-between idea, and it's the space between you and the person you're connecting with and this energy. And so being sure that, you are regulated and you are in a good space and you're in a safe space to then be able to respond and help co-regulate your child. And so when looking at the graphic, you'll notice that the child is doing the same activities and acting the same way in each of the things. And it's how the parent is responding differently that's creating a different outcome and a different response. So the idea of neuroception is being sure that we're in a good space before coming to our child and trying to help co-regulate our children. This next part is the idea of support plans. And so this is a really great activity that you can do with your child or teen. And the idea is coming together and not only identifying how they show stress in these different areas, but then also what coping tools they'd like to use in these different areas. And so we have specified one for school and one for home, just because we know those can look different. And then really these are created to make them your own. You can edit what you would like to include as much as you'd like, but it's not only just creating your own plan, but communicating then that plan to the parents who are at home, to the support people at school. And it's just that visual and putting it down on paper and having everyone aware so that your child knows that they can refer to this whenever they're having big feelings. You know that you can help direct your child to this whenever you're noticing these things at home. And same with the school. The support people at the school also know in what ways your child would like to be helped and what coping plans they would like to use. So on both of them, the first thing is when I'm struggling, I notice. And so identifying what that looks like for them. Like we talked about in the mind-body connection, everyone shows their symptoms of anxiety and fear and stress in different ways. So identifying what that looks like for them, how that happens for them and how they show that. And then jumping to coping tools. And this is also very individualized, which is why we encourage, the children and the teens being the one to create this. So what works for them? We know it may look different at school versus at home. Lots of times I have kids who at school, they want to use more subtle coping techniques than they might at home. So sometimes that looks like deep breathing that they can do quietly. Sometimes it looks like a small fidget that's been approved by the teacher that they can get out and get some energy out of their hands if they need to. But just looking at what coping tools in each space that they think would help them. And then at school, identifying that safe person that they can talk to. And so sometimes it's a teacher, sometimes it's a school counselor, sometimes it's a coach. Other times it's just a trusted adult and staff member that's at the school, but specifically identifying who they kind of want to be their point person when they're having a difficult time. And then this bottom piece for the school one, that I'm worried that specifically identifying what that anxiety might be stemming from. I also have children who like to include what I don't want people to know. So a lot of times, I think Kim might have mentioned this in her section, but sometimes a lot of the anxiety stems from we don't want everyone to know our business. We don't want adults asking us how our parents are at home because we don't want to get emotional. And so having this on the school support plan and identifying also what we don't want other people knowing helps that trusted person at school know what conversations need to be kept private, know what is okay to discuss in front of others, and what the child may want to discuss and what they don't want to discuss. And so that's how the school one is kind of structured. And then that home one, it has the, identifying what it looks like when you're struggling, those coping tools, and then the I can ask for help by. And this piece I really like because I think sometimes the struggle for children is knowing how to ask for that help before they get to those really escalated big emotions. And so whether you're identifying that as a word, it can be like a safe word that they say to let you know that they're having a difficult time, or it can be a nonverbal signal. I have kids that have the best time coming up with the funniest and craziest nonverbal way that they want to communicate that, hey, I'm feeling big emotions and I need someone to check in with me. And so identifying this and putting it down on paper, and then you as a parent knowing that when that word comes up or when that signal comes up, it's code for, I really need a break right now. Maybe I need to pick one of my coping tools and either go practice it privately, or I need you to help me practice them. So some kids do like to talk. It can be a sit down communication about what their feelings are. Other kids just need a moment to themselves. One thing that sometimes we'll talk about is having a time in instead of a time out. And so, a timeout is sometimes a consequence used when we get these negative emotions, but a time in can be used for that connection piece. So how can I connect with you in order to help you feel regulated? Is that a hug? Is that talking? Is that a short play session? What does that look like to help you feel in control of your emotions again? So just talking about these things prior to having them written down, having your child help make this plan and identify it. So that way, when they're having a difficult time, there's already a plan in place. It's already something that they've made and that they can be excited about and that they can feel good about using when they're having big feelings. This next piece is about routines and structure. So talking about how our brains really feel safe when they know what to expect. And the best way we can do this is provide as much routine and structure as possible and making it visual. So when it's visual, there's less room for questions or doubt or misunderstandings. And so creating a visual representation of what that routine and structure looks like. Again, it's great to involve kids and teens as much as possible in creating this. When they have that feeling and sense of control over being able to participate, it helps them feel good about what's going on. So involving them in creating this. So that could be making drawings of what our day looks like. It could be like the schedule. Someone was doing homeschool during COVID. So they made a visual schedule of what their day was going to look like. And that was up every day. It can be as simple as a calendar posted to the fridge, just a way to let everyone in the house know what to expect, make it predictable, help their brains feel safe and know what's going on. For the older teens, technology is they're so involved with that. So you could use your phone calendars if that's a good way to communicate, but just help them know what to expect, help everyone be on the same page. We recognize that especially children of parents who have an illness or injury, it may not always look the same. You're not able to have this predictability all the time, and that's okay. When that happens, if you're able to prepare as much as possible. Help them know what to expect as much as possible. Preparation is key. When you're not able to, also know that's part of life. It happens, and just pick up where you left off when you're able to with that routine and structure. So just, help them know what to expect. Make it as predictable as possible. And that's one less thing for their brains to have to worry about and be anxious about, along with all the other things going on in their life. This next one is more for teens and tweens, and it's the idea of self-care and self-management. So kind of like the support plans we saw a couple slides earlier, it's about identifying the stressors and how their bodies react when they feel stressed, and then creating their own sort of coping plan. And so I want to point out the difference between self-care ideas and self-management ideas. Self-care ideas are more those traditional things we think of when caring for yourself. So like a bubble bath or enjoying some reading time or deep breathing, activities that really help your body calm down and care for your body. Those self-management ideas, I like to think of them more as setting yourself up for success. And so things that we can do to kind of help set our bodies up for success. And so what that could look like is making a predictable routine and schedule. It could look like cooking healthy food for myself or getting my daily exercise or movement in. So things we can do for our bodies to help set us up. And so having the teen or tween come up with these ideas, things that they enjoy, is really helpful. Again, it's having it on paper, that visual, that thing they can come to whenever they're looking for ways to help regulate themselves. And then I want to give some ideas for this by tying it back a little bit to that brain science. We talked so much about what does it look like when our brains, get escalated, have that fear and anxiety. And a lot of these self-care and self-management ideas can tie into that, and that what chemicals and what hormones can we help access in our brains to help regulate ourselves. And so the first one, that dopamine, that reward chemical in our brains, what does that look like? And some examples of this are completing a task. So I know kids that are just so motivated by like their to-do list and just getting things done and being able to cross them off, especially when they're entering those young adult years. Checking something off your to-do list can absolutely be a self-management idea and a way to care for yourself. Different self-care activities. So that bubble bath can be a great way to get that dopamine. Eating really good food, baking and eating good food can be a great way. And then celebrating little wins, celebrating things as they go on, and having those mini celebrations is also a great way to get dopamine in our system. Serotonin is a mood stabilizer. And different ways to get serotonin, lots of them involve being outside. So being in nature, getting that sunshine, taking a walk, getting that body movement in, and identifying whatever that looks like for your child. I think sometimes we think body movement and exercise is so intense and overwhelming, when it could be stretching while we're watching our favorite TV show, or taking an easy walk, kicking a ball around in the backyard, whatever that looks like, and whatever kind of gives that relaxing and that regulation and that serotonin hormone is all great ways to move our body. And then the oxytocin hormone, that love hormone, which is all about connection. And so you can look at hugging a family member, giving a compliment, or receiving a compliment from someone you really admire or love. Even playing with pets. Pets are a huge part of regulating our nervous system and can be so beneficial to us. So playing or walking the dog is a great way to get that oxytocin hormone. And then the last thing, kind of body nervous system wise, that I want to mention that can be a great self-care idea is stimulating that vagus nerve. And so when we look at our nervous system, the vagus nerve is responsible for promoting optimal brain function and contributes to regulating our resting heart rate and our respiration. And so when we look at ways to stimulate the vagus nerve, and there are lots of different ways, go on Google. I spent a long time on Google the other day looking at all different ways to do it. But some great ones that caught my attention are breathing exercises, humming and laughing, and then also short-term cold exposure. So taking a quick cold shower or something like that. All these things can stimulate our vagus nerve, which can contribute to regulating our nervous system. And so helping teens, kind of giving them ideas of different ways, tying it into how it affects their bodies, and then helping them choose coping tools that work for them can be really helpful in promoting these self-care and self-management practices. So the next part of this is going to be talking about the role that nature plays in regulating our nervous systems. This biophilia hypothesis looks at how humans seek out connections with other living things. So that's other humans. We know that relationships are so very important, whether that be with family members or friends. Animals, which pets play a huge part in our lives. Like I said earlier, therapy animals are on the rise, and just cuddling with animals. I hear so many kids in sessions say how beneficial their pet is for them, and how that's a person, they see it as a person that they feel like they can really talk to and connect with. So connecting with animals is huge. And then finally, connecting with nature. So nature can help regulate our arousal levels. And technology, of course, is on the rise, and screens absolutely have a place in our society. But overexposure to those screens and relying on those screens so much do increase nervous system dysregulation and make it harder for our bodies to stay regulated. So, talking about how we can manage that, how to get back a little bit to that nature aspect. It's been shown that interactions with fish, water, and plants all have been shown to decrease anxiety. So looking at how we can include more of that in our day to day and just limit that technology and screen aspect all the time. And so these are just some simple ideas to think outside the screen, both for children and teenagers. I won't go over all of them. I know many of them are pretty self-explanatory. I do like pointing out that some of them do involve that idea of connection. So those family theme nights and game nights and things like that. So also involving connection with that family. Excavation, if you have not heard of it, is a really fun way to get kids to get out and explore a little bit with their different senses. You freeze a toy and in a cup, a paper cup, and you cut it out, and then they can chip away at the ice to get the toy out. So it's that imaginative play, it's that sensory play, and it really helps occupy them, and there are no screens involved. So a simple way to do that. Progressive muscle relaxation, that is one of the coping tools in our awesome book that I referred to earlier, the Don't Pop Your Cork on Mondays, that I always like to practice in my sessions because I do think it's so valuable. But it's the idea of tensing and relaxing different muscles. Usually people work from the toes to the head or from the head to the toes, but just learning how to tense and relax and feel that release of that energy in the body helps kind of regulate our body and our nervous system. And then for the teens, something that's getting really popular that I love is the idea of these vision boards. And so picking things that they're really excited about, that they aspire to, or their goals, and creating a vision board out of it. So it's really involved. It kind of also helps you connect with them in a way of talking about things that really excite them. And they can get these, they can draw, they can get pictures, they can do magazine cutouts is my favorite way to do it. But just ideas that don't involve screen time, that are still really fun, that provide a therapeutic benefit, can be helpful.
Oh my gosh, Ashley, such incredible ideas. And I love this photo with just, children playing with boxes and being creative. And remember, as adults, we need all of these same things too. We need to think outside the screen and, put our phones away. And one other thought I had as you were talking about the vagus nerve, for those of you who may not have heard of the vagus nerve before, just know that it's spelled VAGUS. So a little bit different than the city. But we were just doing a virtual teen group where we focused on the vagus nerve and that using cold to activate our vagus nerve, like Ashley was saying, like it could be a cold shower, but it could also be just drinking cold water or putting like ice on our pulse points. It's pretty amazing how quickly we can activate that nervous system response that is there to calm us down. It's already in us. So really exciting and just such great tips. Okay, so want to focus on this idea of how do I know if my child needs more support than what we're already doing? We've implemented these various things at home. They've got various support maybe through a school counselor or through a coach or through Wonders and Worries, but we're always assessing as parents, do my children have what they need to cope and thrive? And so here's some things to think about. The graph on the right that shows signs of stress in children, these are all things that we often see when illness or injury comes into the life of a child. And it could be other stressors too. It could be, parents divorcing or other kind of bigger things happening. These are normal reactions for children and teenagers to have at times of big change or when there's stressful experiences going on in their world. But when we think about this in terms of do they need added support, the key is looking at the duration and the intensity of the behaviors that you're seeing, the signs of stress that you're seeing, or that your child is themselves kind of helping monitor with you, going back to those ways of assessing. If something is happening for, let's say, a few days to maybe a week or two, that's typically within the normal range, especially if there's a big stressor going on and it's a time of transition. And especially if the intensity isn't increasing or the frequency. Let's say my child's having kind of crying spells. If they're doing that once a day for a period of time, but it's not increasing to 2 to 3 times a day, then that is very likely kind of within that normal range for stress and transition, and continue to do all the things that you're doing and validate and support your child through it. However, if you're seeing that the duration is going on to multiple weeks and months, and if you're seeing increased intensity or frequency of these behaviors, whatever they may be, that's a good indication to reach out for additional resources, to at least have some conversations with additional people that can also give their insight and input, and be talking with your child about it. Always trust your instincts. We really, really want you to tune in to what are your instincts saying about, does my child need more? And if what you're seeing and in talking with your child, you're recognizing that these symptoms they're affecting my child's day-to-day life. My child is not able to thrive because this stress response is really impeding their ability to cope with day-to-day life. That's a time to seek additional support. And so where can you go for that additional support? I'm going to go through a few resources, but always be thinking about your medical team, your child's pediatrician or primary care physician, thinking about the school community. Do you have a school counselor you can reach out to, or your child's teacher? Or it may be that your child is closer to like a band director or a coach of a sports team. That may be somebody that you want to get some input from. Certainly a licensed therapist or counselor in your community is a great resource to go to. Talking with if you're a parent who has an illness, or maybe it's your partner who is dealing with an illness or injury, talking with the medical team for that ill parent, asking to talk with the medical social worker or the nurse navigator. They may know of resources in your community that focus on supporting children and teenagers. And then talking with a child life specialist. So all of us at Wonders and Worries are child life specialists. You can also find child life specialists in pediatric settings, pediatric hospital settings or clinics. And of course, reach out to us at Wonders and Worries for additional resources and support. And this picture on the slide is just a screenshot from our website where we have external support listed, and we have it divided out into national resources. So lots of things kind of across the United States. And then the local resources are focused more on Texas and the Texas communities, the greater Austin, greater Houston, and greater San Antonio areas. So I do want to highlight a few of our resources that we encourage you to utilize. Our helpline, Danielle mentioned our helpline in the beginning. This is here for you as parents. It's also here for professionals who might be listening in to call or email with any guidance that you might need related to supporting children when a parent has a serious illness or injury. And if possible, we will certainly do our best to guide you to additional resources if we're not what you need, but we know of something in your area. And then our apps. So I really encourage you to download our app for parents. It's our W&W to Go app, One Parent on Professionals. It's free and it's at your fingertips. There's activity ideas, kind of building on what Ashley already shared. There's information just to kind of help validate or help you kind of recognize, okay, this is typical for a child, my child's age. All sorts of resources just built right into this resource, this app for you. And you can pause it if you're watching the recorded version, or if you're watching the live version, we'll send you this PowerPoint for these QR codes to download those apps. So this is the one for parents, and this is the one for professionals. And then we have a podcast, which the podcast I just find So beneficial. It's 30 minutes. It's something I can listen to when I'm driving or walking. And Julie, who facilitates our podcast, she's focusing on parenting, all sorts of different parenting tips and tools and ideas, and specifically parenting through illness and injury. And then she also focuses a lot on resources. She brings in community guests who have other programs that they're offering that are great resources to be aware of. And then lastly, we have these various resources. I'll just pause on each slide. So if you're watching the recording, you can pause there and just take a look. We've listed some books and workbooks that we like, some books for adults. This is in no way all inclusive. We just kind of picked our top ones. These are the links to the different videos that you saw, as well as a few other videos. The one that you saw about explaining anxiety for teens, there's another one focused on younger children. And then those both come from the Hey Sigmund website, which has lots of amazing resources and videos. I highly recommend that you check out that website. And then the apps, I mentioned the MoodFit app. I also really like the Calm app, and we haven't directly talked about mindfulness or meditation as an antidote to anxiety, but it's a wonderful antidote to anxiety, and there's a lot of research around that. And the Calm app, that it specifically focuses on building those muscles for mindfulness and meditation. Of course, our apps are there, and then some additional websites that might be beneficial for you. So let me pause here. This is our feedback link, and all of you who are watching live, please follow this QR code. Those of you who are watching the recording, please pause and go to this QR code, and please share your feedback with us. But then I want to have Danielle share if there's any questions.
We don't have any questions, but I do want to say thank you guys for an amazing presentation. I know I learned a lot as a mom and as a child life specialist, but I know we don't have any questions, but if I do have one, and if you guys think of one after I ask my question, please feel free to put it in the chat, guys. But the big thing that kind of stuck out to me, both as a mom and as a professional, is oftentimes I reflect back on a moment where I wasn't regulated with my kiddos, and I wish I would have just like either had someone like tap me out or like find a way. Is there like any tips or tricks you have for those parents that don't have somebody there when they're not regulated and their kid's not regulated, and or like signals to themselves for when they're not regulated? I know it's kind of a tricky question, so I'm just kind of throwing it.
Fantastic question, and I'm happy to start, Ashley, and then you jump in. It's really the same. I mean, Ashley did such an incredible job of talking about thinking about it when you're not stressed as a parent, like when you haven't hit that point where you flipped your lid, and thinking about your own signals, because children can recognize, like if you like say, this is my signal, like I need a moment. I remember hearing a story, it might have been from Dan Siegel, one of his webinars, where the mom just like, she had an apron a lot of times. So, you know, if you don't have an apron, but she would just put it over her head, or she would just, you know, you could just put your head down, or go into the bathroom. That's a wonderful, although children follow us into the bathroom, but you know, have a thing where if I'm doing this, this means I'm needing a break. I'm needing to regulate. And so thinking about it ahead of time and practicing even, and knowing that you will absolutely flip your lid and not remember to do that. And that's a normal and healthy thing, because guess what? Then you have this great opportunity to go back to your children and say, I don't like how I responded. And you can remind all of you, you know what, this is what was happening. And I wish instead I would have done this. I wish I would have said this. And when you do that, you are doing an incredible job of teaching your children that they too can repair when they flip their lids. So Ashley, what else?
That's exactly, I was going to touch the teaching aspect of it, which I think, you know, it's normal and it's healthy to show kids that everyone struggles and can flip their lid. And using it instead of beating yourself up about it or feeling bad about it, using it as a teaching moment for yourself and your kids, and you guys can learn together. I mean, that's, I think, the best way to do this is learn together how to regulate yourselves, and then using it moving forward as practice. We're going to practice these things together, and next time mommy's feeling really overwhelmed, this is what she's going to do. And next time you're feeling overwhelmed, what do you want to do? So just taking it and moving forward and learning from it and using it as a teaching moment, I think, is great.
And I like the idea of like reframing it, right? Like instead of ending my day being like, "Oh, that was a mommy fail," right? Like, okay, yes, we recovered, we repaired, we reattached. It wasn't a fail, it was a learning moment. So I think also that rephrasing it and rethinking about it would definitely benefit me as a mom too, because I think we all carry around a lot of mom guilt, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, what a great question.
We still don't have any questions, and so we can end the presentation there. But again, thank you guys so much. As Kim just moved the slide, if you guys do think of questions later on, please don't hesitate to reach out to them through their emails or our website. Somebody just responded with thank you. So you guys did an amazing job.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here today.
Yes, thank you.